Welcome everyone to the GBSN Cross-Border Coffee Break webinar series, Business Schools and the Coronavirus. Today's webinar includes representatives from the following schools: University of Technology Sydney Business School, Cheung Graduate School of Business, the Asian Institute of Management, and IESE Business School. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to share some logistical information. As a webinar attendee, you are in listen and view only mode, which will not allow you to activate your webcam camera nor your microphone. The first 40 minutes of the webinar will include a moderated discussion with LeClair and the panelists. During the last 20 minutes, we will do a Q&A discussion. If you would like to pose a question or submit a comment, please do so by clicking the Q&A button in your tool tab. A Q&A box will pop up. Type your question or comment into the box. Please make sure to type your name and institution or organization into the box as well. Then click the blue send button. All submitted comments and questions will be put into a queue. During the Q&A discussion in the last 20 minutes, I will call on each person's name. When your name is called, your audio will be enabled, which will allow you to share or pose your comment or question live to the panel. So to begin the discussion, we would like to start with a poll. You will see it here in just a moment. So this poll is really just to test how your institutions have been prepared, how your institutions have been adopting. All responses will remain anonymous. So please take a moment to answer these 3 questions, and I will launch the poll results once we have responses coming in. All right. We are getting some responses. I'm going to give it just a minute here. Thirty more seconds. All right, I am closing the poll. Here are the results. So, how would you characterize your institution's preparedness to deal with the COVID-19 outbreak? 57% said somewhat prepared, 30% not at all prepared, and 17% says well prepared. How agile has your institution been in dealing with the consequences of the COVID-19 outbreak? 48%, we are adopting quickly. 57%, we have been slow to adopt. 0%, we have not adopted. Well, that's good. Last question, how would you characterize changes made at your institution to address the COVID-19 outbreak? 30%, minimal changes. 43%, moderate changes. 26%, extensive changes. Interesting. So, with that, I'm going to introduce our CEO of the Global Business School Network, LeClair, who is the moderator of today's discussion. Dan?
Thank you for that, Nicole. We appreciate your efforts to keep us on track throughout the webinar. We have a very short time with our panelists, and my job is to get as much out of them as possible during these next several minutes. And leave enough time for you to contribute with your questions, for everyone to contribute with their questions. And I'm very curious about that 17% that felt like they were well prepared, because I suspect that had something to do with previous events. And I hope in the future, this event will offer all of us the opportunity to be better prepared in the future. Now, for me, at least, having been in this industry either in a business school or working with business schools for about 30 years. There's been a lot of there have been a lot of events over those years. Everything from things that have, I hope, helped us with SARS and MERS to volcanic ash, keeping people from flying around. Even events such as, well, significant economic events, massive turns in exchange rates. All of these things we've experienced before. But to me, and they've all seemed, at least to some extent, more isolated, more focused on a particular place or region, or potentially more temporary than this one. This one has come rather quickly, at least as far as I know. The first known case was late in December last year, and it really wasn't recognized as a potential global challenge until late in January. And if you're like me and like others in our industry, we're traveling around the world, paying attention, but perhaps not always realizing the potential impact at the time. But as you know, things have changed rather dramatically, and at least the last numbers that I've seen, we have about 110 cases around the world, and about 105 countries have been affected so far. And like others that I've talked to, I believe that this is not near the end of what we'll experience in our with this virus and with our business schools. So without hesitating any longer, I'm going to launch us into a discussion shortly. Leading up to this, we were lucky to have several conversations with schools such as University of Miami's Herbert Business School. I spent some time in Michigan, at the University of Michigan. We talked with Monash, we've talked with several schools. All of them recommended the same thing, that if we're going to get the most out of this webinar, which we hope for, we should spend more time talking about the responses of business schools and less time talking about the scope of impact or the scale of impact, even less time talking about our future. But for now, the best thing to do is to focus on the present and what business schools are doing. So we're going to do that. I'd like us to think about the responses in three categories. One is what I would call students and instruction. These are the things that revolve around making sure that students have the academic continuity that they desire and need. These are also things that revolve around how they interact with each other and their hygiene, what you might call student affairs kinds of activities, as well as other things like study abroad. Secondly, I'd like us to talk a little bit about faculty and research and the kinds of things that are impacting our faculty, which are central to the business of management education. And then finally, a set of things under what I would call administration and leadership. These include how we communicate, the extent to which we, in some cases, negotiate with the institution that we are a part of. In this case, I think there are fewer of those than in other cases. But I'm going to now just pause for a moment and say thank you to everyone for being here, and then introduce our panelists and just jump right in. So when I introduce you, please just give a wave and say hello so that people can recognize your voice as we go through the webinar. First of all, we have Roberto Macchio from IESE in Spain. Roberto?
Hi, good morning, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Dan and Nicole, to organize this webinar.
Thank you for being here. We have Lee Zhou from the Hong Kong Graduate School of Business. I think, Lee, you're in Hong Kong now at the moment? Yes, great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I think you can see me and you see my logo, so you can know I'm at CKGSB.
And going further south, going all the way south, as a matter of fact, we have Leona Tam from the University of Technology in Sydney Business School. Leona?
Hello, everyone. I'm in Sydney right now, so this is good evening, but I'm sure it's good day for everyone else.
Great. Thanks for being here, Leona. And in the Philippines, from the Asian Institute of Management, we have Mavelyn, but we also have Kenneth Hartigan Go and Mavelyn Chavez.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, good afternoon. It's actually 4 p.m. here in the Philippines, and it's great. Everything is doing fine here.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Hartigan Go from the Asian Institute of Management. I'm happy to be here to learn with each other. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being here. Why don't we start with students and instruction? This is one that at least I've gotten a lot of questions about. And if I may, start with you, Lee, at Cheung Kong Graduate School of Business, because I think this is where many of the first reactions came, obviously, in China. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you've reacted or adapted quickly to this outbreak. You're still on mute, Lee.
There we go. Okay, yeah, we, this thing happened when we were in the winter break. If you recall, it's happened just around the Chinese New Year. So it really caught everybody off guard. And, but our immediate response is we have to move everything online. So that's why IT is report to me, is also part of my portfolio. We start on get IT prepared for online education. For those who are not familiar with our school, most of our students are executive students. We have a very small MBA program, but a huge EMBA program and a huge executive education program. So these people are not, that's why we have not done online training education at all so far. But it is really, that's why we get our IT people prepared during the break. And also online, sorry, maybe I jump a little bit to another topic, which is online office, how the employees are coordinated with each other online. So, I get our IT team work very hard to get those systems up to speed. And also we started as soon as we did a survey then, if the students want to have online courses, and surprisingly, most of them say no, because they're executive, they appreciate the time together, and they don't want to do online. And but our full-time students, which is English program, full-time English MBA program, is English program. They have full-time. They have things to follow. So that's why we said maybe we start with full-time MBA students. They appreciate their time of graduation and looking for jobs afterwards. So we did this. We tried this with the MBA, and our MBA students surprisingly were not. Initially, they accepted. They say, okay, that's good. And then they found that all the others are not doing this. And so why should we do that? I thought, I spend, me and our faculty spend about an hour to explain them why you should try this at least. Anyway, the perception of the students, this is probably experience a lesson to share with all of you, is a lot of them perceived online education is watching videos. So they did not know now we can do interactive like we're doing now, and so this that's how we got get people get our at least our full-time MBA students try that first, and then they have good suggestion. Because it's very hard to follow all the content online if it's a core very hard academic course like a finance, and then they make good suggestion. Maybe try that for electives. And so last week we had an elective about economics, economic reforms and development in China. And actually, the professor is in London, and but he gave the lecture to all over, to the students all over the world, and that proved successful. So that's, I wanted to keep my answer short as your suggestion, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Great. We'll come back to you on some of those questions, but I want to turn to Roberto, because just before everyone joined us, Roberto told me that there's an announcement that's going to happen about Spain, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you're planning that in terms of instruction. Roberto?
Yes, so precisely, yesterday evening, the local government of Madrid decided to close all the educational centers, including kindergartens, schools, colleges, and of course universities. So from tomorrow on, we need to go online if we want to operate our courses. At the beginning, it could be 2 weeks, then we will see. And Spain, as you know, is following this negative track of increasing infected people. We are number 6 in the world, if I am not wrong. And what we did at IESE, basically a few weeks ago, when the first cases started appearing in Spain, we created basically 2 committees. One is a crisis committee for coronavirus in general, and the objective of this committee is to decide policies, supervise the situation, look into every single potential risks, and take decisions accordingly. And the second committee is academic, and the objective of this second committee is to establish ways of operating online within the different programs that we have. So basically, I was part of the 2 committees until, since the beginning. And since yesterday, I am more focusing on the academics part, because it's quite urgent now to push and to put in place new ways of working. Actually, online we started years ago with the online programs, mostly in custom programs, working with companies, and then extending to other programs, open programs, executive education. And then also we have degree programs. We have Master in Business Administration, Executive MBA, and Global Executive MBA. Global Executive MBA was one of the first one to use online learning. So basically, from tomorrow, all the courses will be online. Our MBA, our Executive MBA, and also potentially the open programs, the executive education open programs. In cast open programs, meaning with participants coming from different companies, different situations, industries. Customized program, I am responsible of custom programs at IESE. We are managing the situation differently because, of course, we are partnering with companies. So we are respecting the policies that each companies are putting in place. And normally they are more restrictive than the general policy of the government and our own particular policies we set up at IESE. So with customized program, only a very few cases are online. And most of them are being delayed, whereas some risks are in place because of the participants are coming from regions that are considered at risk, or other restriction regarding the traveling, etc. For sure, we will go online with the degree programs, and we will go online with the open programs. Open programs, we will figure out in the next days, but our intention is to go online, and then we will see. It's a good opportunity actually to exchange some ideas because online is not the same as face-to-face. And it could be interesting for me to also to listen to the other colleagues what they are doing, because our idea is that we need to redesign, some of the programs, and it's not possible, to run many sessions online every day as we do in face-to-face setting, and so I don't know if.
Thank you for that, Roberto. I had made a note, and we're really happy that you could join, that IESE has been ranked very highly, #1 in executive education over the years. And between you and the Lee at Cheung Graduate School of Business, this question about working with executives has become an important one. And I appreciate your point that others have raised with me, even with student projects, is that it's important to work closely with the companies involved and to make sure to respect their policies. But it's still very much a challenge, and it sounds like both of you experienced some initial challenges moving online. Leona, I know at University of Technology Sydney, there's been an effort to move online even prior to this, and that work, I'm sure, has been helpful. But if you could also focus also on what you're doing with undergraduate students as well as graduate students, I think that would be helpful to the group. Leona?
Happy to share. Thank you, Dan. It's actually good to hear that other colleagues are also struggling. We are in the Southern Hemisphere, so to a certain extent, we are actually lucky, and this is really a luxury that this week is just the first week of this semester. We just started with what we call the autumn semester. It's more like a spring for everyone else. Like Dan said, we have already gotten some of our programs, at least in the blended learning mode, and we also started on some programs, in fact, in the online teaching platform. So because of that, the university setting as well as the business school, we have a bit more prepared in terms of both the technology and the academics, because faculty is the most important part in here in terms of teaching. If they feel comfortable and they can manage that, students definitely will feel a little bit more at ease. So in terms of both undergrad and postgrad, we did not try to put every single subject online, because we just simply did not have this kind of resources to put every single subject that we would put it available as online. So how we do with undergrad students as well as postgraduate students in this case is we look at I don't want to say that every possible combination, but we look at across the board in different programs, different students. In fact, what would be their study plan? What are the subjects that they enroll for this semester? And then we are trying to see some common ground, and then trying to see what would be some of the subjects that we should really put it online. And then for others, we are looking at some substitutions, be a bit more flexible in terms of what the students need to take this semester to fulfill the progression requirement. Now, of course, at the moment, we still don't know when the students will be able to come on shore to get on campus. At the moment, we are putting at least like the first few weeks of the semester's material, both available on online and offline for those selected subjects. Now, the lecturers are well aware, the teacher well aware that some of these students will need to catch up a bit more if they are right now offshore. So there are different, I won't say different ways of engaging with these students right now offshore. And so in terms of the interaction, because just like Lee pointed out, it's not about just watching videos. And we can't do that because this is really not an experience that any student could really learn to their benefit. And it's not going to help them by the time that they come on shore. So it's really, to me, I believe that it's, we have a little bit more time to prepare. We're on the really lucky time zone. And also because we are trying to find the common ground to gain efficiency in terms of what are the classes that we really need to put online versus like some of that. Say, for example, we have a class that we need that for say 100 students. versus another class, we only have 5 students that would need that. Then we would open the 100-student class as online mode. And then the class that only have 5 students who would need that, we're trying to find some way to substitute that with other options that to help the student.
Right. Well, it seems like prioritizing is a pretty important thing for all of these responses. Thank you for that, Leona. We're going to come back to, I'm going to ask a question in a bit of from everyone who's responded so far, because one of the things that I skipped over was this question about the scale of impact. And I know in Australia, it's got a lot of international students, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that in a minute. But we want to turn to Maybelline and Kenneth in the Philippines. I'm particularly interested in an introduction from Maybelline, but with Kenneth, he shared it prior to this, some work that they're doing in his program. He manages a school at Asian Institute of Management that is about development. And I'd be curious if you could share that experience. But Maybelline, did you want to do a quick introduction to what you're doing at the AIM first?
Yes, hello. Basically, I'm the HR director here in Asian Institute of Management. I'm in charge of the employee force. With what we are doing now with COVID is basically we're preparing everyone in terms of mitigating and having it enter here in the premises. So we are lucky enough here in the Philippines that we are guided by our Department of Labor advisories and Health Department of Health. So we're guided by that. But basically, it's more of making sure that the premises are clean, reminding everyone and giving them information of what COVID is all about, correct information, because here in the Philippines, I think that social media is quite popular here. So we kind of combat that by giving them scientific information from DOH, World Health, and the CDC. So for now, we've implemented a very few changes on in terms of entry, food handling, and cleanliness. Basically, that's the main factors that we did the changes.
Great, thank you very much. It's a good transition for some additional questions as we go, because it's not just instruction, but a lot of schools are spending a great deal of time with the whole set of things that revolve around the student community and their health. And I will ask others to add to what you've said already. And I have heard that communication is really one of the biggest challenges, making sure that the right information is put out at the right time in the right ways. So thank you for that. But now, Kenneth, you shared some information about how you're trying to work with students in ways that might help some of the communities. Yes.
Sure. Let me introduce a bit about Asian Institute of Management. It's a 52-year-old school. It's a very small school, but started off in the Philippines to create socially responsible entrepreneurs and managers in the region. There are 4 schools, and I'm just one of the heads of one of these 4 schools. And the school is called Stevens Willie Graduate School of Development Management. And in that school, we have 2 programs, a Development Management Master's and a Master's in Disaster Risk and Crisis Management. So it's very, very close to our heart that we deal with this issue because, as May has indicated earlier, we have been receiving quite an interesting number of social media fake news that is creating some form of panic and hysteria. And we come forward in trying to leverage how we could create a better risk communication packaging within our school. Our students are quite level-headed. They don't readily believe in this false negative news. And what we've done in the meantime from an educational program is that we have the school heads gathering together and we decide on how to calibrate our response to certain government policy decisions. For instance, just last night, our president have declared that there is a cancellation of all classes in school in the national capital region, just in Metro Manila. And then we have to decide on how we will deal with our delivery of our different programs, from MBA to entrepreneurship to data science and to our development management and disaster. What's interesting I'd like to share with you is how we bring and use this real world scenario into the classrooms. We apply the study of coronavirus into, for instance, critical thinking. Do we believe everything we see and hear in the media, and how the students will now ask the right questions? We've also incorporated this into our day-to-day conversations with our disaster risk students. So every day we have sharing of information and we curate it, we ask questions, we reply to each other. And some of our students who are in fact part-time students who are executives and practitioners in their respective field have been applying what they learn into their work. Some work in the hotel business, and they are now drafting hotel protocols on how to deal with coronavirus and this COVID for making it safe for their working environment. Others are working in security agency or consultancy, and they're providing relevant advice to their companies on how to proceed with caution, using science as a way to make evidence of science to make informed decision. We had a special class. We invited former health secretaries and the clinicians who were handling these kind of cases to learn science, and we dissected politics, decision-making, and strategies into the classrooms so that the students benefit from this kind of discourse. And lastly, we've just created our business continuity committee, for which we now are preparing our institution in case of a possible pandemic scenario. I'd like to say that we're not yet in pandemics, but of course, moving forward, in case that does happen, at least we are prepared in case of this eventuality by creating blended education platforms.
Right. Well, it's a great opportunity for you to benefit from the work of some other schools. I understand that the number of cases is increasing fast, but it's still very small in the Philippines. Thanks for that. Just by show of hands with our panelists, how many of you are also taking advantage of this opportunity for learning to talk about business resilience, about crisis management and things like that? Are you also doing similar things? Just by show of hands. Great. Great. Now I'm gonna just do a quick round. So maybe just a 20-second response from each of you. You know, we skipped over this question about impact, but, you know, I had heard some early numbers, and, you know, only if you feel comfortable sharing this information, but I had met with the school very early on that estimated, and is actually in Australia, Leona, that estimated that about 20% hit on the revenue associated with student tuition in particular. And I can imagine, Roberto, that some of these delays working with companies and custom programs has really created a little bit of an impact in terms of revenue. Maybe it's only short term, but if you could just give me a 20-second version of what you think the financial impact at your school may be. And of course, again, if you don't know or don't feel comfortable sharing that information, it's okay. Leona, just quickly.
Well, maybe for other Australian universities, they have probably more international students than we do, because at UTS across the university, we have this cap at the 30% of international students. So actually, in fact, the impact is to a certain extent is contained. So in terms of how much exactly is the financial impact, I think I really cannot tell the exact number. But if you think about this, because in fact, we are starting the semester a lot later than the rest of the world. So we are still on this travel ban that we pretty much the government is reviewing on a roughly about weekly basis to see when the students will be able to actually come in and or do the self-quarantine. So we probably do not have the exact number on the financial impact just yet.
Right. Yeah, well, thank you. Lee?
Yeah, I think it's hard to put a number now because the situation is still continue in China. And but at least we know that some of those are outbound. We send our students to other countries, and now all of them have been canceled. And so that's the revenue to our executive education program. So that that revenue will either be delayed or most likely it has to be delayed at least, if not disappeared.
Well, we're gonna maybe actually, Lee, maybe you could just comment quickly now about something I read, and that is one thing that happened at the Cheung Graduate School of Business is that students and alumni went into fundraising mode. Could you just tell us quickly about that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's something I want to say, that the sense of responsibility of the school, and we encourage our students to give back to society. And as I said earlier, most of our students are very successful business people. And half of them are chairman and CEOs, and more than 80% of them are above a VP level. So it's quite different from a lot of other schools. And in a situation like this, we encourage them to give back to society, take responsibilities. And actually, in total, the companies that our students led donated, I got a number to February 19th, about a month, almost a month ago. A few weeks ago, come to 571 million US dollars, and that's from our the companies our students are leading, and the ones that are directly from our each chapter of our student alumni. In total, it came out more than 2 million US dollars. So that's something. But also we not only to to give them money and help provide the medical equipment, but also a lot of our alumni students did go there to help. And it's sad one of them is sick right now, and she almost became a hero in our community. So that's something. Thanks Dan for asking this. That's something we do. And also in terms of the responsibility to the society, our faculty, as what the gentleman from I think Kenneth said, there are faculty are doing research, very immediate research, and share our results to the community too. And also our alumni, our faculty publish or circulate at least 8 articles from different perspectives to analyze the situation and give a policy advice to the government, and also give suggestions to the business community too, especially small and medium enterprises who are really suffering. And sorry, I probably said too much. Okay.
It's important. I think one of the things that I'm happy to hear, especially given our work at the Global Business School Network, is that it's not just about responding and managing on for your own health of the school, but it's also about the impact on your communities and how business schools can respond in a way that helps communities get through this crisis. Is pretty important. So thank you for that. Roberto, rather than talk about the impact, maybe you could just touch on a question that's come up in different places for me, and that is that we know that some of the testing offices are closed in certain parts of the world, and that schools are not only thinking about students now and their academic continuity, but thinking about students for next year. And how are you handling the recruitment changes that need to be, put into place in light of this current environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the impact for us, it's big, mostly in customized program. As I said before, as Lee said, it's tough to put a number, but we estimate at least 15-20% of losses or reduced revenues for this academic year. And the rest of the programs, in particularly degree programs and other executive education open programs, should be less affected. With respect to your last question, of course, our policies impact the way we do recruiting, and we have restrictions. Actually, in this moment, we cannot admit to our facilities people coming from the regions that have been considered at risk. And in this moment we are trying to do online, and this is quite easier, at least in my opinion. It's easier to make interviews or open days, or other meetings, webinars like the ones that we are doing now. This is, in my opinion, easier. No, it's more difficult to deal with the ongoing programs that, as I was saying before, we need to redesign.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for that. I know that some schools are conditionally admitting students even without a GMAT or other scores at times, simply because the testing centers are closed. At least this is for MBA programs. If anybody else has any comments about that, great. But I want to shift gears just slightly and talk about study abroad, or at least short-term study abroad. Lee, you had mentioned that you had stopped all of your study abroad or travel courses immediately. How about Maybelline, in your environment, you must have students that had planned to study in different parts of the world. Same with you, Roberto. Could you just tell us a little bit about how you're handling that? Have you canceled? Are you managing on a case-by-case basis for student groups studying abroad? Maybelline?
I think it's Ken who's
May
better
I-
to answer that.
Yeah, may I answer that? With respect to our exchange programs of students going abroad, some have taken the decision to go nonetheless, but these are the minority. We were expecting a large group of international students coming over here this week, but all of them, except for 5, canceled. So we couldn't run the program anymore. Road shows for our recruitment for international students have been also canceled because of the inconvenience of traveling to certain hotspots area. And definitely there will be some financial impact to our school revenues, of which I cannot peg a number as of the moment. We feel that this can be very significant, but nonetheless, we are assuming that there's going to be a better day when everything will be stabilized, and we will then be able to continue our new programs. But as far as the existing programs are concerned, life goes on, and we are completing that work. There was a question earlier, Dan, that you asked about our contribution to the community. Yes, recently a large business chamber has approached us for some advice on how to deal with this COVID, and we are proposing to help them through in business continuity planning. One of our students, a professional, we sent him off to also give a seminar to the small, medium, and enterprise, because the value chain will be affected, if supply chain rather would be affected if the small, medium enterprise were not protected in terms of preparing themselves for this kind of eventualities. So these are our little social contribution to the business community and to the community in general.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Does anybody else want to comment about the student trips and how you're handling the student trips? Roberto?
Yeah. We have 5 campuses in the world. Madrid and Barcelona are the biggest one, but we have in New York, Sao Paulo, Munich, and we have a network of associated business schools in different countries of the world with a lot of programs running in these places. So we decided basically to cancel those parts of the programs, degree programs or customized programs, and we decided to relocate part of the program at the beginning using other facilities in other countries. And today, as I said before, in our Madrid campus, we have this important restriction. So we will, as I said before, we will go online. But of course, our priority is people's safety, so students and people working here. So we are constantly looking at the government policy, local government policies, and we are doing a little bit more than what they require in order to guarantee, safety.
Well, that's very helpful. Several schools have indicated that the information available is sometimes challenging in order to make these choices. But I know of a very large school sending hundreds of students around the world at the moment, and first of all, defaulting to, in this case, the U.S. Guidelines, but then secondarily the local guidelines, but also emphasizing with the projects what the companies are doing in their policies. And then finally, the fourth level is what the students and in some cases the faculty preferences are, because we don't always know what their individual circumstances are, their health conditions and things like that. So leaving that option to students about travel is the most important layer. How about faculty? Has this been a challenge in working with faculty? I've heard from several, even on this call, that faculty preparation to move online has been a challenge. Is that something that all of you have also experienced, that if faculty have not already been teaching online, then teaching online initially right away has been a bit difficult? How have you managed that just quickly? Have you found opportunities for training? Have you found resources that might be helpful? Leona, yes.
Well, we are, because like you mentioned earlier, that in fact we already have started on the blended learning and also online teaching kind of mode. And so that actually got some faculty already started to switch before this coronavirus situation. And at UTS, we also have a centralized unit, particularly provide support to all these more interactive kind of teaching and learning methods. So part of that was about doing things online. So we have this centralized resource that, in fact, probably was not tapped into as much as now. So in the past, for example, they would provide more like one-on-one customized support for anyone who wants to put any part of their material, teaching material or classes online. But now, say, for example, just last week or the week before, there would be some larger scale kind of like workshop or small size, say 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 kind of like hands-on support to see exactly what you can do in certain situations. And we're pretty fortunate to have this particularly centralized unit to support the online part, which exists way before this coronavirus situation.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the central institution, because I've heard from some schools that one of their biggest challenges is working with the central institution to make sure that there's coordination, and often there are policies that are distributed, and then there's a process of negotiating how to handle those costs. But in your case, it sounds like the institution and the schools are working closely together, and there's a great deal of support. Roberto, has this been a challenge at the University of Navarra? You're only loosely associated with the university, correct?
We are part of the University of Navarra. IESE is part of the University of Navarra. And our business school has approximately 160, 180 professors. Now we tend to use our own faculty. And I see positive this challenge because we started 10 years ago working online. And I think the challenge now is a little bit different. And I would like to link with one of the questions that I have seen in the chat. Because one of the questions was asking how to get organized without facilities, no facilities of online classes, no, and because we do have virtual classrooms, no, and in Barcelona, Madrid, mostly we have classrooms with big screens, and we can run a case study methodology online because we keep the eye contact with the participants, no, and this is of course helpful, but it's limited, no, because the numbers of programs that will potentially go online will be higher than the number of a virtual classroom. So the challenge here is, in my opinion, to leverage the technology like the one that we are using now. You know, it's Zoom or WebEx or other technologies, and train faculty to lead sessions from their own office or from their own home, because actually in the academic crisis committee I mentioned before, we define 4 scenarios, and one of the worst scenarios is actually when nobody can access to the facilities of the IESE, in our case, our campuses, and we need to provide the service online, totally online, with the professor connected from home, with the participants, of course, connected from home, and this is possible. Of course, the issue for us is how to change some of the methodologies and how to train some of the faculties to do so, because it's a little bit more difficult to do, a class seated in front of your PC at home, rather than using a virtual classroom already designed for this kind of activities. But I think it's possible.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that, Roberto. I want to, a little bit late. I'm sorry about that. I want to turn to the audience and some questions. I'm going to ask Nicole to help with that. And she's, I think, about to open up some mics so that we could address a few questions in the remaining time.
Thanks, Dan. So just as a reminder, if you would like to pose a question, please submit your question or comment in the Q&A tab box so that it's put into the queue. When it comes time to your turn, I will unmute your mic so that you can pose your question to the panelists directly. So first we have John North from South Africa, the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nicole, and Dan, everyone, for hosting. So briefly, we're in a moment when listening to experts and the necessary large-scale collective changes about and how we go about our lives may mean the difference between life and death. The statement and then the question is that perhaps COVID-19 is the canary in the proverbial coal mine. Experts have been telling us for many years that governments and businesses need to drastically address the carbon dilemma, yet we only stop flying when a more personalized threat arises. The question is, what can business schools learn from COVID-19 about addressing the climate emergency and about radically transforming our economic systems that are seemingly hell-bent on harmful economic growth? As an aside, I did read this morning Professor Marshall Burke from Stanford writing that the reductions in air pollution due to COVID-19 in China have probably saved 20 times the number of lives that have been lost so far to the virus, which does not mean that pandemics are good, but rather that our economies absent pandemics are bad for our health. So what can we learn from COVID-19 with regards to addressing the climate emergency? Thanks.
Wow, that's a perhaps a couple of webinars to cover a topic like that. But I'm wondering if we have a volunteer from the panelists to make a comment in response. Yeah.
Okay. If nobody, I can just say a few words. And I think that the climate change. I think this thing really forced us to think, what we can do online. By doing a lot of things online, already we are cutting the the air traveling. And one thing we are doing now, actually, this I think the whole thing is how we turn this crisis into an opportunity. And that's the key mentality we want, key message we want to send to our faculty and to our students. And we take the lead for this. And because, we are very good at providing the global executives with the China insights. Up to now, last year, we've been doing everything in China. So everybody had to fly to China to take our courses. But now we say, we're designing online courses. So for those who will not fly or should not fly, and they can get our content about China in their own country. That's something. That's how somehow we can cut their at least their air flight, their flight, their tickets, the emission from the flights, airplanes.
Thank you. I like that, and it is reflected in some of the earlier comments that this is an opportunity for us to make a bigger difference in our communities, but also, as you put it, turn crisis into opportunity. John North, I know that we'll have many opportunities to talk about this in the near future, but one more question we'd like to take from the audience.
From Karen Russell, Irish Management Institute in Dublin, Ireland. You have the floor.
Karen, you need to unmute yourself. You're on mute now.
Okay, I can hear her question. Do you have challenges with participants?
Hi, sorry. Oh. Hi, can you hear me?
There
Sorry,
you go. Yes.
Caught me a little off guard here, so it might be a bit noisy in the background. But thank you so much to everybody so far. It's been really insightful to hear all the points. And we ourselves here are more in the containment phase. So it's kind of at that point where we're preparing. And I just wondered, for each of you, I've just changed my question a bit, how affected is your domestic market really compared to the international? Are you seeing that, I mean, for some people in Madrid, for example, they're closing the schools, but is there still a commitment from your participants to come to courses and to engage overall in the domestic market?
Roberto,
yeah.
You want?
Yeah, absolutely. Our participants in general are fully committed, and we are the ones that are telling them, please do not come, because okay, from tomorrow we have a local government order in Madrid, and we cannot open the doors. But since a few weeks ago, we were, as I said, we were studying each single risk case, and we had participants, for example, working in companies where some cases of coronavirus were detected. And we asked them, please don't come, and they were very responsible to telling us what was the situation. So we had no cases up to date of students or participants or staff member infected, fortunately. But we did have cases in which they were working close to people who were infected, and we asked them not to come and to connect by online. And we manage since last week basically some programs with participants, a few participants connected online, and most of the other participants in class. And they are respecting our policies. All of them, we have absolutely no issues with this. Of course, domestic, let's say, programs are affected because we are, we are in different countries, basically, except Sao Paulo. Except Sao Paulo, all the rest of the campuses are in our campuses in Spain, in the US, in New York, in Munich, are subject to these risks. And we have a lot of programs all over the world in customized programs or other executive education programs or masters. So we do are affected. So our let's say international programs at first were the first to be affected, mostly when the China outbreak exploded. But then in a very quick way, we all the rest of the program are now in similar situations. So I don't know if I answered you.
I think that was great, Roberto. I've been given permission from Nicole, who's helping us with logistics, to go about 5 minutes early. We worry, are all of the panelists okay to stay on for about 5 minutes?
Yes.
We'll do one more question. We may lose a few in the audience, but we'll do one more question, but then give all the panelists maybe 20, 30 seconds after that question to give some final words. So last question, Nicole, can you?
Last question, Abraham Owusu from Peregrine Africa in Ghana. Abraham, you have the floor.
Abraham, you need to unmute yourself too first. Now you're still on mute.
Okay. I can read his question if he doesn't. Okay. What are the implications of the COVID-19 on quality assurance of programs and can be put in place to ensure that quality is not compromised whilst considering safety and security of global concern?
So we lost, is Leona here? Still, yes. Leona, and do you want to take us a question?
Dan, can you hear me? I can't really hear you.
Well, did you hear the question, Leona?
No, I didn't hear the question. Would you mind reading that out, Nicole, because I didn't hear Abraham talking.
Yes, I will read the question again. What are the implications of the COVID-19 on quality assurance of programs and can be put into place to ensure that quality is not compromised while considering safety and security?
So in terms of the quality assurance, we have pretty detailed mapping in terms of, can you hear me? I just want to double check.
Yes, yeah. We can. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of quality assurance, because in every one of our subjects, in fact, there would be exact mapping about the learning outcomes and assessment and details like this. So for the subjects that we have selected to put them online, they have the same thing as well. So I would say that for that part is not compromised, but to be exact, because we just started this semester, this is the first week. So we haven't had any assessment of students' performance just yet. So we will need to see how that is done in terms of the first assessment coming in. Now, we also have students, in fact, choose to say they want to defer because they are saying that, well, can I actually just wait till things kind of calm down before I do this study or continue on the study? And we fully respect that decision because I think this is not just about studying. Many of you mentioned that, the panelists also mentioned that this is affecting so many parts of our community and also students' lives and their families. So we have that flexibility for students to choose when it's the right time for them to engage with their academic studies again.
Great. Thank you, Leona. With the remaining time, and thank you again, Nicole, for the extra 5 minutes, but we could just do a quick round through the panelists, starting with Maybelline and Kenneth, just a quick 20, 30 second, if there's anything that you wish you would have said or had the opportunity to say during the webinar to help the audience, or just any final remarks. Maybelline and Kenneth?
Maybe you want to go
Maybe
first?
I'll go first. Well, because I handle the worker side or the employee side in AIM, basically, we just want to share with you, or thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you what we have been doing so far, up until last night when the president of the country has given orders for the Metro Manila schools to do a 1-week closure. We did a brief and quick touch up of what we're doing and how we can actually make sure that learning continues and the workforce is still okay, and the work will still continue. So thank you for giving us that opportunity.
Thank you.
From my side, from the academic side, I'd like to say that maybe we could look into how society, people respond to this issue, how media is portraying the narrative, as well as how leaders are making decisions. Might be a good, important case studies to learn from, and I hope we could all collaborate and join in this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Maybelline and Carolyn. Quickly, Lee, final remarks?
I think a lot of the people are talking about the end of globalization, and the people talked about a few years ago already, but my view, the world will be re-globalized. And I think that this is a good example. Look, we've never met if there's no such a thing. And now, say, this is called a Global Business School Network, and now it's active. And I think the globalization will take another shape or another direction, but globalization is the trend. That's my personal opinion.
Right. Thank you. I like that. It's an important point to make moving forward. Roberto, final remarks?
Yes, thank you for inviting me in this interesting webinar. Thank you all the panelists and questions. So for me, it's of course, this is a moment in which, as we said before, it's a difficult moment, and for us, it's a good opportunity. I think also for the other schools and other companies to learn and get prepared next time. This coronavirus issue, I believe, will be soon fixed, and maybe take some months or whatever, but we will recover. We will come back to normality, and in some years from now, we will remember this year has opportunity to grow, to do things differently, and following the last comments after the last question, I mean the quality of the services we offer. After people's safety and participant safety, our most concern is to maintain quality. In the short term, I don't believe it's possible, but we will do our best to recover and to learn from this.
Well, thank you, Roberto. I think the question about quality is indeed an important one. And somebody had mentioned earlier about the kinds of relationships we build on campus. And I do understand this to be a challenge for those kinds of relationships and the closeness and mutual support that we provide. Leona, final comments, and then we'll log off. Yes.
Well, in addition to what everyone else has already said, something I did see is very good to see during this difficult time is during sessions or time that we could share experience and also what we have learned from each other, no matter it's internally within the university or externally with other network. It's amazing to see how much more we can actually achieve and support each other. So this is really a good learning that it might not be a coronavirus next time. It could be something else. But the world is changing and there are challenges, continuously all the time. So this is what we need to do. And I'm glad to see that we could, in fact, come together and put away our differences and face the challenge together.
Thank you for that brilliant closing, all of you. We have a lot of work to do, and you can count on the Global Business School Network. We will be compiling resources and making them available not only to our network, but more broadly. And this is just a starting point. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, everyone who joined us. I think, and thank you, Nicole, for the little bit of extra time. It looked like all of the participants, as well as the panelists, stuck with us during this extra time. We'll share the videos. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder, we have a second webinar happening at 11 a.m. Eastern Time that will include representatives from SFU BD School of Business, IESE Business School, Lagos Business School, and the MIT Sloan School of Management. So if you'd like to join that webinar, it'll be in a few hours. Thank you again to the panelists and, of course, to Dan.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
See you
you.
in person sometime soon.